Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lora Rolling and this is part 1 of the Jolly Snowman ornament tutorial. This is the Jolly Snowman ornament that we are making. It is so cute with all the little snowmen and the snowballs at the bottom. And today we're going to be doing the unit called Snowballs. We just have a few materials to get ready, so let's get them listed and then we can get started. Let's go. So the beads that we're going to be using in today's video are Miyuki Delicas. I have silver lined crystal and white pearl. I'm just going to call this silver and white. We'll also need some beading thread and a beading needle. I like to use the Eslon Fire in the color crystal, and I use 4-pound thread. You could also use 6-pound fire line if that's what you have. And then I like to use a size 10 beading needle. You could also use a size 12. For implements, I like to use my long nose pliers to hang on to my thread at the end of the video, and I cut my thread with scissors. And then I'm going to use the fire method to end my tail today, and I'll show you how I do that in today's video. Let's thread our needle with 3 feet of thread and then we can get started. So I've threaded my needle and now I'm going to pick up my first 3 beads, and they're all going to be white beads. Then I'm going to take these 3 beads and I'm going to pull them down to the end of my thread, leaving about a 6-inch tail. Now let's tie a square knot. So cross over on the top and then pull your tail through. And then cross over on the top again and pull your tail through. So now you should have what looks like a little snowman. Now I'm going to put my 2 fingers in the lower loop, the one that has the beads, and then I'm going to pull on the long thread and the tail thread until that top loop turns into a knot. Now we have our tail. So I'm not going to actually touch it to the flame, but I am going to get it super close just so it melts the tip. Just like that. And it turns into this little teeny bead or little teeny knot. So now I'm going to put my fingers back in the loop, and I'm going to be pulling on the long thread while I'm twisting the loop until that little knot meets the long thread. Just like that. Now I'm going to take my thumbnail and I'm going to pull that knot down to the beads until they're in this tight little triangle. And that completes our first row. I'm going to tug that little knot over to one side so that it looks like the thread is coming out of one of the beads. And now let's pick up 2 more white beads. We're coming out of this bead, it looks like, so we're going to sew through the bead that we're not coming out of, the one that's furthest away from the knot. And then we're going to try to make those beads sit right on top or right as close as possible to the beads that they're on top of. I'm going to call those buddy beads. I don't know why I call them buddies. I just think it's cute. Anyway, okay, so let's pick up 2 more white beads. And we're coming out of this bead, so let's sew through the next bead. Once again, let's try to get them to sit on top of their buddies. And now let's pick up 2 more white beads. We're coming out of this bead. Let's sew through the next, and then we'll also sew through its buddy. When we sew through 2 beads, that means that we are putting our thread in position to start the next row. So we are actually stepping up to the next row. So now we've completed row number 2. Let's start row number 3 with 2 white beads. We do have a lot of white beads in this video, but they're not all white. So just, I'm going to call them out as I go. But yeah, so we're sewing through the next bead, making sure that they sit on top of their buddies. Now let's pick up 1 white bead, and we're coming out of this bead. We're going to skip the one that's set downward, and we're going to sew through the one that's poking up a little bit. That is what I call our up bead. Now let's pick up 1 silver bead and 1 white bead. And sew through the next. Now let's pick up 1 white. We're coming out of this bead. We're going to skip the down bead. We're going to sew through the up bead. Now let's pick up 2 white beads and sew through the next. And pick up 1 white bead. This is our last bead in this row. So we're coming out of this bead, we're going to skip the down bead, we're going to sew through the up bead and its buddy. So sewing through 2 beads means that we are stepping up, and now we get to start row number 4. Let's start with 2 white beads and sew through the next. Let's pick up 1 white bead and sew through the up bead. 1 silver bead this time and sew through the up. Let's pick up 1 silver and 1 white and sew through the next. One white bead, sew through the up. 1 white and sew through the up. One white and 1 silver and sew through the next. One silver and sew through the up. And 1 white bead and sew through the up bead and the bead right below it. And now we have stepped up and we get to start row number 5. Let's start with 2 white beads. Still making sure that they're sitting correctly. 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, I turn my work as I go. It just makes it so much easier to sew that way. Let's pick up 2 white beads. One white, one white, one white, two white beads, one white, one white, and one white, sewing through the last 2 beads, and now we are in position to start row number 6. Let's start with 1 white and 1 silver. One white, one white, one silver, one white, two white beads, one white, one silver, one white, one white, two white beads, one silver, one silver, one white, and one white, sewing through the last 2 beads. And now we get to start row number 7. Let's start with 1 white bead and 1 silver bead. One silver, one white, one white, one silver, one white, two white beads, one white, one white, one white, one silver, one white, two white beads, 1 white, 1 silver, 1 white, 1 white, and 1 white. Sewing through the last 2 beads. And now we get to start row number 8. Let's start with 2 white beads, 1 white, 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 and 1 silver, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 silver, 1 silver, 1 white, 2 white beads, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 silver, 1 white. And sewing through the last 2 beads. And now we get to start row number 9. Let's start with 2 white beads, 1 silver, 1 white, 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 and 1 silver, 1 silver, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 1 white, 1 silver and 1 white, 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 and 1 white. Sewing through the last 2 beads. If I can get, there we go. And now we get to start row number 10. Let's start with 2 white beads. One white, 1 silver, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 silver, 1 white, 2 white beads, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 silver, 1 white, 1 white, 2 white beads, 1 white, 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 and 1 white. Sewing through the last 2 beads. And now we get to start row number 11. Let's start with 2 white beads, 1 white, 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 2 white beads, 1 white, 1 silver, 1 white. Oh, I see a fuzzy. No fuzzies wanted. 1 white, 1 white, 1 silver, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 2 white beads, 1 white, 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 and 1 white. Sewing through the last 2 beads. And now we get to start row number 12. Let's start with 2 white beads, 1 white, 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 2 white beads, 1 white, 1 silver, 1 white, 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 2 white beads, 1 white, 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 and 1 white. Sewing through the last 2 beads. And this completes our 12 rows, and we can see our little snowballs. So cute. Now, if this is the first triangle that you've done with me, I do connection rows so that we can connect our units together to create the complete ornament, right? So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to cap this corner with 1 white bead. And each unit has connection beads on some of the sides, and some of them just don't have beads at all. This particular unit, we're going to have no beads on this side, no connection beads on this side, but we are going to have connection beads on this side, and we're not going to have any on the top. So in order to get from here to here, we're going to sew through some beads. And to make it super easy, you'll notice there's like a little dent in your triangle. If you don't have one, that's okay. That's fine. You just don't want to see any of your thread, so you don't want it to be too loose. But if you do it as tight as I do, then you have a little dent. So I flip over my unit so that I can actually sew through these beads a little easier. Now we're coming from this bead. We're just going to, without picking up any new beads, we're just going to sew through each of these beads until we get to this bead right here. And I personally like to follow this line, this quadrant line right here, but you really could pick any bead that you want to, as long as it's 1 bead per row until you get up to here. While I'm doing it, I'm going to ask you the question of the day. So this is little snowballs, little silver snowballs in this unit, right? So it doesn't snow very often where I live. We might get maybe a week or 2 of snow in Texas. I live in North Texas, like above Dallas. So we don't get very much snow, but boy, when we do get enough snow to make a snowball, we are out there trying to make snowmen. It's so funny because we don't get very much snow, everybody in our neighborhood pretty much goes out and plays in the snow. It's so fun. But anyway, so the question of the day is, when it snows, if it snows, do you make snowballs? And if you don't, is it because it doesn't snow where you live? I lived in, for 4 years, I lived in Las Vegas, and it only snowed 1 year, 1 winter in Las Vegas, and I was shocked, but I still made snowballs. We tried to make a snowman out front. It was so funny. But anyways, okay, so I am now coming out of this bead, And so now we're going to cap this bead, turn it into a point by adding one white bead, just like we did the other corner. And now it's a little point. And now we're going to add white beads all the way up this side. So I'm going to call them out in case you're writing it down. One white, 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 and one white. Now that we are up at the top, let's cap this corner with one white bead. And now we get to finish off our thread. We want to make sure that this bead is super secure though. So let's once again sew up the beads without picking up any new ones. We're going to sew up 6 beads. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now I'm going to do what I call a zigzag. I'm coming out of the top of this bead right here. I'm going to sew down the bead right next to that one. And then I'm going to sew up the bead right next to that one. Zigzagging it, making this bead a little more secure. Let's sew up 2 beads. 1 and 2. And then let's zigzag again. We're coming out of the top of this bead. Let's sew down the bead right next to it. And sew up the bead right next to that one. Now I think this one is super secure. Let's sew up 2 more beads and then we can cut our thread. 1 and 2. Now let's take our thread with our long nose pliers and then try to get your scissors as close as possible to the bead without cutting the bead, and just cut off your thread. Now we have completed your number 1 unit, which is called Snowballs. You only need 4 of these for this project, so go ahead and do this, or I'm sorry, you need 5 of these for this project, so go ahead and do this 4 more times, and I will see you in a second. That was so much fun. Thank you so much for being here with me today and beading along with me. Remember to like and subscribe and hit that bell button so you're notified when the next video comes out. I can't wait to see you there. Thanks for watching.